how can I sell my art? A lot of gatekeepers and a lot of people affected your ability to earn a living as an artist. Their goal was to hide the buyer. They would say things to you like, if you didn't have us, you couldn't survive. And the dealers would tell us, oh, galleries don't want to work with artists. They made our minds think that we needed them. And what I found out is that all they had told us was not true. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the art world as I know it from my experience. Of course, this is just a little snippet of my worldview and how I've gone through life for the last 30 years, navigating through the art world and what I've seen, what I've experienced. And I've noticed along the way, there was a lot of gatekeepers and a lot of people that had big, weighty opinions that affected your ability to earn a living as an artist. And it seems like that has lessened. The grip of the gatekeeper has really lessened its strength and authority in that. And I think that's a very good thing for artists. So my career started 30 years ago. And I had just graduated from school. I went to art school, then I transferred to University of Georgia, and I started working right away as an artist. I got hired to work for this company in Atlanta, where I literally drove to a job. I had an art studio in this big building with other artists, and I created. And I was sort of given a quota. I had to complete 8 paintings every single week. And I think they told us 8, but I had to do 6. I knew that 8 was a loose number. It was like they told us 8, and if I didn't complete 6, I'd probably be fired. So they would bring a stack of fresh canvases, and I would just see these blank white canvases leaning against the wall, and I had to get to work. And so I learned how to work production style, where I would do the first layer to all 6 or 8 canvases, then the next layer, and then the finishing touches. It really taught me a lot, and it really opened my eyes because I had no idea that something like this even existed. When I went to art school, my professors basically had a consensus that nobody really makes it as an artist except for a very small percentage of artists. Everybody else either teaches art to high schoolers or elementary school, or you go into graphic design, or you don't have a creative job at all and you do something else and do your art on the side. And I went to my education class and I knew that was not for me. I did not want to be a teacher. And so I got out of that. I decided to go for the fine art degree, even though most of my professors said I would never make it. My big vision in life was I was going to work a job that I didn't care about, but then moonlight as an artist and hope to make it one day. So then I landed this job and I was thrilled to be able to paint and make a full-time living by painting. I learned a lot about the decorative art market, and like I said, I don't think my professors knew about it. I think that all they knew was this sort of academia concept of an art career, which involved getting grants. You had to know somebody and finagle your way in, getting shows and exhibitions, and then hopefully one day getting collectors and getting some attention. And that was their only concept. And they weren't successful. None of them were able to sell their art really for a living. They had these professor jobs and worked in academia, and that's how they made a living. And, they showed their work periodically for the ones that actually still painted, but most of them didn't. So these were the people that were leading the artists, people that had not been able to succeed as an artist. So here I am in the decorative art market that I didn't even know existed. And I started to see all these ways that artwork was bought and displayed and enjoyed. Things like really nice restaurants hire and commission artwork, usually through consultants and through art advisors. So I realized there's an entire industry around this, an entire industry around the hospitality market, an entire industry around corporate art. Banks buy art and hotels buy art, and hotels would buy art. They would put the originals in the lobby and the hallways, and then they would have contracts with the designers and the artists where they would print the artwork, and that would be in the rooms. And there would be prints made in the rooms, and artists would get a royalty from that. And I got some hotel jobs once I went freelance, and I left the company that I worked for because now I'd been exposed to this industry, and I freelanced and went out on my own. My husband also followed suit. So both of us worked independently in our own art businesses, but for the decorative market. So we saw our art go into hotels, into corporate spaces, as well as private spaces. And we learned a lot about color and design and themes and what sold and what didn't sell. And we painted for that. And I always had in my heart that I had fine art that I wanted to show, but I couldn't figure out how to break into that market. And that was that elusive, mysterious market that my professors had talked about. And I thought, oh yeah, I can never make it. I just have to do couch art. Then one day I, without even realizing it, had crossed over because we had worked with an art dealer, and this art dealer would place our artwork in a lot of the decorative markets, but then there was also galleries that served both markets. And so collectors would come to those galleries and they would find your artwork and become fans and start collecting your artwork. And then their friends would see it and they would start collecting our artwork. And I just kind of one day looked around and thought, oh, I'm in all these galleries with other fine artists. I've broken into that fine art market. And I didn't even realize it. It just sort of happened. After all these years, I've seen that there's so many different markets and avenues and places where artists can sell their art. And it's sad to me that these are not spoken about or told in art schools. And I still know that this is happening today because I meet artists all the time that went to art schools and they say, yeah, I never knew. They never told us about it. So I think that many artists are asking and wondering, how can I sell my art? How can I get my artwork out there? How can I get it seen? And there's so many ways, especially now with the internet. I got my start in art before the internet even existed. At least as far as I knew, it didn't exist. And email didn't exist. I had to send things through the old-fashioned mail in the form of slides and aluminum tape. Things have changed a lot. I have found in my earlier career that everybody in those channels of distribution, so who do I mean? I mean the agents, the art reps, the big dealer companies that would buy artwork for below wholesale at maybe 15 or 20% of what the retail was, the art consultants, the art advisors, the interior decorators, frame shops that served the interior decorator market, the galleries, all of these channels of distribution, their goal was to hide the buyer, that retail buyer. They did not want you to know that person. Whoever was eventually getting this art, whether it was the hotel or it was an individual that was decorating their home office, whatever it was, they wanted to hide that person, because if the artist could ever connect with that person, they were out of a job. They couldn't leverage that sale. And every time the artwork would pass through one of these people's hands, the price would increase. So sometimes we were selling artwork to a dealer for maybe $400, and by the time it got to the end buyer, it was selling for $3,000. The markup was huge as it went up, and I would have loved to have gotten $3,000 and be able to sell less artwork. So in order to make a living, we would create about 20 paintings every single week. We were selling about 80 paintings a month, my husband and I together. And that seems like a lot of artwork, and it really was. And we would just go into production and we would create sort of the same look in slightly different ways, slightly different color palettes, but again and again and again. And we got really fast, and our skills really increased. But because we were at the very bottom of the food chain of this distribution line, we didn't make very much per piece. But our artwork was selling for a higher price. Our price range was around maybe $2,000 up to about $10,000. When we figured out how to bypass that group of people, and it took forever because everybody in that channel of distribution would say things to you like, oh yeah, I mean, if you didn't have us, helping you get your artwork out there, I mean, you couldn't survive. And the dealers would tell us, oh, galleries don't want to work with artists. Artists are so hard to work with. They have their egos, they're so sensitive. Galleries won't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Yeah, they like to work with dealers. They indoctrinated us and made our minds think that we couldn't be real business people and actually represent ourselves to anybody further up the food chain. We needed them. And I don't know that I ever would have gotten out of that mindset, except that, thank God, the crash of 2008 happened. So we were in this position where we were just cranking out the artwork and we couldn't take vacations because now there was this huge draw on our artwork and we had to keep up with demand. And all these outlets that had our artwork were selling it so quickly that they would want a replenishment of their inventory, and we had to just keep cranking it and keep painting. So we would ask our dealer, oh, we kind of want to break and we want to go on vacation. He's like, well, you can go on vacation when I have enough inventory. And we were painting 20 paintings a week. We could not paint any faster. So when that crash happened and the economy collapsed in 2008, our dealer basically, because he was leveraging the debt, he had bought all the artwork, he had all this inventory, and then the galleries, because they were struggling financially, they weren't paying him once the artwork was selling. Once that happened, our dealer told us that he was not going to buy any more artwork from us. So John and I had to really hustle and find other ways to make it. And we started doing like tent shows and working to get directly to the consumer. And again, social media at this time wasn't available. There wasn't really a way to connect with art buyers except for through tent shows or exhibitions. There wasn't a lot of exhibitions happening. So we really went for the tent shows. Or we would collaborate with other businesses like wineries or high-end boutiques, or do live painting in places where people with money would go. So we really had to hustle, and it taught us a lot, and it gave us confidence that we really could move beyond this sort of dealer type representation. And then we worked to work directly with galleries. And what I found out is that all that they had told us was not true, and that galleries really did like working with artists because they could get the story. They could hear what the artwork was really about. They could know the artist, and then they could tell the collector, oh, I'm friends with this artist. I know the artist. I know why they titled their piece this way, and they could tell a story about it. And the dealer was really working to keep this big vacuum between the gallery and the artist. And likewise, the dealers would tell the galleries, oh yeah, that artist is so hard to work with. You need me because I deal with the artist. Oh, they have a huge ego. Don't even try to give the artist a suggestion or critique their artwork. They'll come unglued. And so the galleries were thinking, ooh, I don't want to work with artists. They're hard to deal with. So I met a lot of gallery owners, and we did become friends over the years. And they would always tell us how much they loved working with artists that were easy to work with, and how much more fruitful the whole relationship was. So after working with these galleries for many years, I started to hear that familiar gatekeeper noise. And the gallery owners who we were close to and we were friends with, you could suddenly see fear in their eyes. They started saying things like, do you have a website? You don't have a website, do you? We even had a few galleries that forbid us to have a website. It was forbidden. If an artist had a website, they wouldn't represent them. And they would say so. They would say, oh, good thing you don't have a website, because we will not work with artists who have a website. And then, we kind of laid low, and we would have a website, but it didn't have our name. We called it Milan Art and Design. I mean, that kind of had our name, but when they would look up, John or Ellie Milan, they couldn't find the website. And then we did get found out, and And at first we weren't selling art on our website. We didn't have any art for sale. It was just sort of like a portfolio. This is the art we create and this is who we are. But we didn't have any kind of e-commerce associated with it. So then when galleries did find out, we would tell them, well, this is a tool you can use, and it's a way for us to display all of our artwork. So if we have a piece in another gallery, then you can sell that if somebody's interested, and then split the commission with the other gallery. And I think that could work. So this is a tool for you. And we found that we were having to almost help the gallery see that they need to embrace these ideas. And this is kind of in the early days of when artists started to get websites, but a bit before social media. They really had a lot of fear, and they would tell us stories about other artists that stabbed them in the back, and they would sell to their collectors, and the collectors would find a way to go around the gallery and get it a little bit cheaper from the artists, and how they would never work with those artists again. And it was just terrible. It was just kind of another layer, another level of fear and gatekeeping, and them wanting to make sure that they didn't lose anything, rather than figuring out how to embrace this new technology and how to work with the artists and develop win-win situations. So once social media kind of came on the scene, and I watched my daughter as her art career began to spring up, and she was embracing social media, and she was getting really known, and there was a lot of people following her, and she was getting commissions on social media, I thought, I need to do social media. So I started an Instagram account, and I was a little bit late into it. I didn't embrace it immediately because I didn't understand it. And I started building a following from people I didn't even know, and it was incredible. And then I began to understand and really see the potential. And it amazed me, because at that time you could paint something. I watched my daughter finish a painting, take a picture of it, post it on Instagram, and immediately get something like 50,000 likes. And I thought, in one day, 50,000 people saw this painting? I mean, I used to paint something, once it's dry and varnished, nobody's seen it yet, bring it to the gallery go, yeah, I think we want that. We want to put that in there. They would hang it on the wall, and maybe a few hundred people would see it before it sold, and then it would just sit on somebody's wall in their home, and nobody else would see it unless they had a party. It was a completely different way of thinking about art. And nowadays, the gatekeeper, I guess, is the algorithm. Trying to beat the algorithm, trying to actually get all your followers to see what you post. You could have 50,000 followers and maybe only 2,000 of them ever even see your post. There's just always this constraint on artists for their artwork to be seen. And there's a constraint on the collector to find good art, to find more art, to be exposed to artists, to learn about the artist, to hear from the artist, to connect with the artist. And there's these constraints and these gatekeepers that keep that transaction from happening. And I just know that as we progress, and there's YouTube channels, there's lots of events that can happen in person. There's a way to document all of those events and show it. Sort of produce your own content for people to find you easier in lots of different ways, not just one way, Instagram, but there's a lot of ways. There's Pinterest, there's YouTube, there's even Reddit, there's Twitter, there's so many ways, and artists are empowered to even create their own event. 20 years ago, if I said, I'm making my own event and I'm going to invite you to it, most people would be like, well, who are you? Why should we go to your event? But now that's very commonplace, and you don't need this stamp of approval from somebody to rent out a space, have a party, and invite a bunch of people to it to show your art. That's very commonplace today. So the way that I see things going is the art world is flattening out. There's less peaks and valleys and mountains to climb in order to be known and to be seen. And the playing field is becoming more level. And what that's doing is it's making prices kind of go more to the lower end, And the volume of art that's sold on that lower end, there's a lot more volume of that being sold than this really high-end pricey art. It's easier than ever to connect with an artist, follow an artist, understand, where the artist is coming from, be a part of their process, be a part of their story, hear the stories of what inspires them, and be connected with it, and be able to follow their journey, and have artists that collectors are becoming friends with and following over time. I even, sometimes when I travel, I will meet collectors that I had never known before, but because they're following what I'm doing in my story, then when I've traveled in a place that either they live or they're traveling to as well, we'll meet and we'll connect and we'll have great, amazing conversations. And I've made a lot of friendships with collectors over the years. And I think that the idea of art collector is leveling out as well. It used to be the art collector was like this very wealthy, hard to reach, prestigious person that had this deep knowledge base about art. And now art collectors are everywhere, from every social and economic background you can imagine, all over the world. People are finding value and virtue in art and collecting art, even if they don't have a ton of money and they don't have these, PhDs or whatever in art history. They're just regular people that fall in love with something beautiful and have to have it. And that's becoming very, very common. And that's really difficult to gatekeep. You can't gatekeep that. That's everywhere you go. You can go out to dinner and talk with the waitress, show her your art. She could fall in love and give you a commission. It happens all the time. It's a lovely place for the art world to get to, where elitism can't survive. And everyday people can create art and everyday people can buy art. And we can meet each other, we can find each other. And so if you are watching this and you are an artist and you are experiencing the things that I'm talking about and you are able to sell your art to just everyday people, let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story. Or if you're an artist and you're struggling and you can't figure out how to get your artwork out there, I want to hear that too. And if you're watching this and you've bought a piece of art and you don't have a PhD in art history, and you just are that type of person that when you see something you love, and it's something that you're able to buy, that you'll buy it. I would love to hear that too, in your story in the comments of how art has affected you. I'm really grateful that I've had at a fairly young-ish age. I mean, I don't know, I feel like I'm young. I'm 51, but I feel like I have a lot of years ahead of me still. So I feel like I'm about mid-career, right? And so for the last 30 years, I've seen huge sweeping changes in the art world. I've seen the gatekeeping of knowledge about the art world, or how to navigate it, decrease over time. And it's been a bit of a slow journey. I mean, if I think back to my college years, I was completely in the dark. And then I think about where artists are today. There's so much more available to them. There's so many more tools. There's so much more access to be able to share what they have and let others see what it is and connect with the people that want to buy it and own it. It's a beautiful thing. So I'm glad you're here, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more of this. I'll be having other guests, other artists, art collectors, anybody in the art field. Tanner will be back, and we will talk about all kinds of things about art. And my talk show doesn't have a name yet. I am thinking of a name, I don't know, like Ellie's Talk Show about art. That doesn't have a ring to it. We need to come up with a name. If you have a fabulous name for us, let us know what it is in the comments, and maybe we'll decide to call this show that name. Thanks for being here, and I will see you next time.